Hello, American Lit 2. We are in week three. So I don't know about you, but week three is typically when things start to get into a bit more of a groove for me. Things also get a little more overwhelming. It just all kind of becomes more real, I think, in week three. So I'm hoping that you have found yourself getting into a rhythm of checking the course on Wednesday, really taking stock of your assignment for the week, the page length of your readings, um, looking at some of the videos. Are there any longer ones this week or shorter ones? So you can pace yourself throughout the week. Because, like I've said before, and like I've said to many of you individually as well, a course like this, you can't just do Tuesday at midnight before the Wednesday deadline. I want you to, again, think about if you were taking a 3 credit hour literature course on campus, you would be in the classroom for more than 3 hours. And then in addition, you would have reading and writing assignments. So I know that sometimes we think online classes might feel easier, but when you think about that time commitment, it's just important to remember that as you are pacing your readings throughout the week. So, I just wanted to say hello and check in, and then also look at this week together. Some logistics, just kind of reminders of how to move through the class, and then a little bit about the content as well. So, let me share my screen. There we go. So again, it's very important that you look at our class in module view. So if you click home or modules, this is what it looks like. And week three just opened. By the time you're looking at this, a link to this video will be in that top spot. Let's look at the assignment together. And this is the week I make a note just to make sure we're all on the same page, that you pay really close attention to the options in your assignments. The text list at the top of our page is all of the texts that I plan to get throughout the semester. But this assignment, this weekly assignment, is where very specific page numbers and selections live. So the expectation is that you read everything that's in the read section for a week, even if your discussion posts and reflections don't hit every single thing that you've read. The expectation is that you read everything. Um, so again, I have that little announcement. I don't want you to overwork. I don't want you to read more than what's assigned, but I also don't want you to underwork and not read what you're supposed to read for the week. Um, and I just send that reminder that when you click on a link and it's a sad paper, just keep going. But of course, if there is ever a legitimate dead link or if I've made a mistake, it is so helpful when you message me and let me know. I really appreciate that. And also, if you just have any questions or thoughts in general, please reach out. Um, so for this week, you're going to read two short stories, The Story of an Hour and The Yellow Wallpaper, including why I wrote the yellow wallpaper. Mrs. Spring Fragrance is optional. So this is a great short story, but I'm making it optional for this week. And then I'm asking you to read two selections from The Souls of Black Folks by W.E.B. Du Bois, The Forethought and I of our one of our spiritual striving. So it's like the first chapter of that text. Um, and then two poems by Paul Laurence Dunbar. So as you get into these readings, you will very quickly find that we are at a point in history and a point in our readings where we're reading two very iconic texts of women's literature and two iconic pieces of African American literature. So it is worth noting in the scope of American literature as a whole, it wasn't until the 1970s that Black literature and Black studies and women's literature and women's studies really became a scholarly endeavor, that scholars and academics and literary folks really paid attention to the history of writing from these marginalized groups. And so that's why the textbook that we have is in its 10th edition, and my women's literature and African American literature textbooks, also both by Norton, are in their third edition. So I always think that's very symbolic. So this week, I'm asking you to read these really important pieces of literature that I think are also really good, but also think about perspective and the role of gender and race in American literature. This is a weekly assignment. Certainly, there's so much more to dive into, but these will give you kind of a good foundation to think about things critically through a very historic and literary lens. And then, of course, I'll ask you to watch the linked videos. We do have a discussion forum this week, so I'll walk through that in a second. And then week 3 reflections. So you can see here that the YouTube playlist, there aren't very many videos this week, but the first one about Kate Chopin is about 26 minutes. So it's a bit longer. It's one that you can probably listen to and get what you need to get out of it. So watch those videos for the week. I've included this, and you might get some Comp 1 flashbacks when you see this image of the rhetorical situation. So, the rhetorical situation, this infographic, is one that I always like to have handy, certainly in Comp 1, when this is the focus of the course, doing rhetorical analysis and reading and writing arguments, but even in literature classes, because I want you to think about perspective, always, and thinking about the subject material, the text itself. What do we know about the writer who wrote it? What do we know about the subject matter? The reader, so who is the audience? And then the context. What's happening in history? What's happening in culture that might shape that text and also how it's received? So when we talk in particular about women's writing in this era and African American writing, this is really important to think about perspective, because as you'll learn about Kate Chopin, and I don't want to, give too much away about this first story, but you'll learn about her as a writer as well. She died penniless. Some of her writing was considered far too scandalous at the time, and she wasn't successful commercially. It wasn't until decades later that scholars unearthed her novels and short stories, really, and gave credit where credit was due. But at the time, for a woman author in America to be writing very frankly about infidelity and marital unhappiness was considered far too scandalous for the general public. And that has everything to do with that rhetorical situation. Other things I have posted here, Go Rest Young Man. This is from Psychology Today. This is some context for the yellow wallpaper, which again, you might have read that before. Please read it again through this new lens. But we'll have time in the discussion forum, hopefully, to talk to one another about some of the content. Both of these two stories, I don't want to lecture too much about them before you read them, because they involve either surprises or, a narrator who perhaps is slipping into mental decline, and we'll talk about that. But the Go Rest Young Man, because the yellow wallpaper is based on a true medical treatment that women used to receive in the late 1800s and early 1900s, of the rest cure, and that will give some context. And it will talk about what men at the time were medically prescribed if they had what we would consider anxiety or depression. I have a couple of links about separate spheres ideology. So this is an ancient Greek idea that was in some ways reinvented in the 1800s in the Victorian era in England and in America as well, that there's a public sphere and a private sphere. Public is masculine, private is feminine, and that is where men and women belong in their respective spheres. So wanted you to learn a little bit about that. You'll notice this journal article is optional. This is a really great journal article, but it is long and kind of academic. So if you're interested in this subject material, I would encourage you to save this, but it's not required reading. And then just a couple of links about what was happening in Black history at the time. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal doctrine that set into place what we consider Jim Crow laws. And then also who Jim Crow was, where that name came from. I have a brief article about that. So, a lot going on in this section about the kind of social and cultural context for our writers in this era. And then your assignments. I don't have a discussion forum every single week, but I do this week. So you just want to look over this carefully and make sure you understand that in your discussion post, you will respond to two of these prompts. So number them, you know, two with your answer, five. Oh, I will fix this. Obviously, I deleted a prompt at some point or another and didn't renumber. Forgive me, but I think you know what I mean. So give the number, give your response, and then as the week progresses, try to engage with others, comment on others' posts. You may talk about a similar topic in the discussion forum and your reflection, but for this week, you should not double dip. It shouldn't be, okay, I'll write my reflection and then copy and paste into the discussion forum. There might be times later where I kind of ask you to do something like that, but not this week. These should be um, unique perspectives. And then the reflection assignment is very much like this past week's, but I'm just asking you to do two. So you'll have two long paragraphs, either two pieces of literature from the week or one piece of literature and one response to an article or video. So hopefully this is starting to feel a little bit more familiar because this is the basic structure of what the weekly assignments will look like. And please start quoting the text, including in-text citations. You don't need a works cited page for these, but you do want to practice that. And as you do that, I make comments in the quiz in terms of, oh, be sure to do this, be sure to do that. But in general, if you are quoting information from the textbook that's the introduction or the biographical information, you'll cite the editor. So it'll be Levine and then the page number. If you are citing the poet, the short story writer, then it's their last name and the page number. Unless it's a poem, then you put a line number because things can't be easy. So just do your best. And as you practice that every week, it'll be easier as you write your first essay. You're like, I got this. I know how to quote and cite, and it'll feel very comfortable. So I think that's it for this week. Again, a lot of weaving together of history and literature this week and a focus on marginalized voices. And we'll just keep going in weeks ahead in terms of mixing in a little bit of history as we look at the pieces of literature that were produced at that time and certainly shaped by what was happening in culture. Thank you so much. Please keep reading closely and writing well. And I'm always here if you need anything. Have a great day.